Business is all about making connections. But some connections are easier to make than others. With a CNN partner hotel, the world is always at your fingertips. CNN partner hotels, connected to your world.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
Good morning and welcome to your new day. It's Sunday, May 29th. We're grateful that you're starting your week with us. I'm Boris Sanchez, live from Uvalde, Texas.
And I'm Christy Paul. Boris, obviously there in Uvalde, you've seen people just even last hour at 5 a.m. where you are come out to that memorial that is behind you, and you're probably standing in a place where you're soon going to see at some point today President Biden.
Potentially, yeah. You're right, Christy. President Biden headed to Uvalde, Texas, coming to comfort a grief-stricken community following the latest mass shooting in the United States. Just a few hours from now, President Biden set to visit this area and the memorial at Robb Elementary School, where 19 students and 2 teachers were killed. In a commencement address delivered yesterday, the president spoke of the grief that families here are experiencing. Here's some of what he said.
I'll be heading to Uvalde, Texas, to meet with each of those families. As I speak, those parents are literally preparing to bury their children. In the United States of America, to bury their children. There's too much violence, too much fear, too much grief.
Over the last few days, mourners have flocked from all over to a makeshift memorial outside the school. People coming from all over Texas to pay their respects. Notably, across the country, in upstate New York, Vice President Kamala Harris similarly placed flowers at a different memorial. This one for 10 people shot and killed at a Buffalo supermarket following a racist attack targeting black people. During the service, the Vice President called for Americans to unite.
Enough is enough. We will come together based on what we all know we have in common, and we will not let those people who are motivated by hate separate us or make us feel fear.
And back here in Uvalde, preparations are underway for President Biden's arrival. Let's take you to where the president is now. CNN White House reporter Jasmine Wright is traveling with President Biden. She joins us live from Wilmington, Delaware. Jasmine, walk us through the agenda for the president's visit. What is he doing today in Texas?
Yeah, Boris. Well, the president and the first lady have a long and likely emotional day today when they head to Texas. We will see them depart from here in Delaware just later on in this 7 o'clock hour Eastern time, and they get to Uvalde, Texas around 11 o'clock Eastern time, really putting in for that transit. Now, the first thing that we will see from them is that they will head to that memorial at Robb Elementary, really to pay their respects to those who have passed away. And then we will see both the president and the First Lady attending Mass at Sacred Heart Catholic Church. We know that the president is a deeply religious person. Often here in Wilmington, he goes to church, so he will be doing that in Texas. And then the president and the First Lady, they will be meeting with families of victims and families of survivors. Now, they're going to be meeting with them for just under 4 hours. The White House intentionally put a lot of time for the president to meet with these families, becoming the consoler in chief and doing what he said that he wanted to do a few days ago, which is put a little little bit of comfort in their life in this really tragic situation. And after that, we will see the president, or the president is scheduled to meet with first responders. Of course, some of these meetings are closed. The president, like he says, wants to have frank conversations with people, seeing what is happening on the ground, and then they will return here to Delaware after. So really a long day, marking the second time in just under 2 weeks that the president and the first lady have visited a memorial site after a tragic mass shooting here in the country. Boris.
Tragically, a familiar role, a familiar sequence of events for the president. Jasmine Wright from Wilmington, Delaware, thank you so much. When President Biden arrives here in Uvalde, he'll find a community that is mired in grief and still processing the loss of those 21 lives. CNN correspondent Adrian Broadus joins us now live on the scene here in Uvalde. And Adrian, in addition to the grief, a lot of families here are expressing anger and frustration. Share with us some of the conversations that you've had here in the community.
You know, I've heard from a lot of people, folks who live here and folks who've traveled from far, even sitting on this lawn. They are upset and they want accountability and action. I spoke with 2 teachers yesterday who say they are frustrated when people bring up the idea that educators should take weapons inside of the classroom. They say they didn't sign up for that, and that's not what they want. I also spoke with a grandmother and her granddaughter, and she was moved to tears as she talked about the 911 timeline and something that happened at her daughter's school recently. Listen in.
I'm here with my granddaughter, Daniela. She is a 7th grader, and it kills me every time she goes to school that I don't know if she's going to come home. They had a lockdown a month ago that someone had threatened to shoot up the school, and her mom wanted me to go get her, and I live 2 miles from her school. I would have been there in a heartbeat, but I was on the other side of town. And it's just sad that it is sad that this is happening.
And her granddaughter, Daniela, told me she's afraid to go to school, but she's not going to let fear stop her because she said she needs to get an education and she should not be afraid to learn. Boris.
And Adrian, can you give us a sense of what they told you about the president's visit and what it means to them?
I'll go back to the teachers. They said they welcome consoling, they welcome the prayers, but at the end of the day, they said they want action, and they believe the president has the power to do that. And they're waiting to see if this time will, in fact, be different.
We'll see. Adrian Broadus, thank you so much for your reporting. We want to bring in Tennessee Democratic Congressman Steve Cohen. He joins us now. Congressman, we're grateful to have you this morning. Thanks for sharing part of your Sunday with us. We mentioned that the Vice President Kamala Harris spent part of her weekend in Buffalo attending the funeral of another mass shooting victim. We want to play for you some sound now. Listen to this.
Let's have an assault weapons ban. You know what an assault weapon is? You know how an assault weapon was designed? It was designed for a specific purpose, to kill a lot of human beings quickly. An assault weapon is a weapon of war with no place in a civil society.
Congressman, you have co-sponsored legislation that would ban assault weapons. I'm wondering what you would say to those who argue that even when there was a federal ban of assault weapons in place, they were still used in mass shootings like the one at Columbine.
Well, we have to do something, and we have to start, and we don't know if we had an assault weapons ban in the 94 to 2004. I believe that the incidence of mass shootings declined. That there are all kind of different statistics, but I think it helps, and I don't think that certainly anybody under 21 years of age should get an assault weapon. And that should be, you know, they might be in the market. You can't go and get them all that are already out there, but you can stop new ones from coming and making them available to young people, and you can prohibit the sales of of them to people under 21 or prohibit them entirely. I mean, there's really no reason to have an assault weapon except to kill somebody. I heard that there was a Louisiana senator said they use them to kill feral pigs. Well, there are plenty of ways to kill pigs and get plenty of pork and not have to obliterate them with these type of weapons, and you can eat the pigs. It's absurd. These assault weapons have no place in a civilized society. I just think we need to get rid of them entirely, and we need to have better background checks. And it's not just this particular in Uvalde or even Buffalo. It's all of the killings we've had in the past. There have been different reasons. In Las Vegas, it was bump stocks, and the Congress wouldn't pass a bump stock ban. I think that President Trump did something with an executive order. But we need to act, and Congress needs to act, and it's the Republicans in the Senate that are stopping us from getting something done. So the people in Uvalde may be looking at President Biden. He's there. It's Ted Cruz who's not there.
I want to ask you about the conversations, the bipartisan conversations happening on Capitol Hill, but what do you say then to the millions of Americans who argue that a law-abiding citizen's access to those weapons, even assault weapons, is enshrined in the Bill of Rights, and in any way limiting access to those weapons is unconstitutional? What do you say to them?
Well, I grew up, I'm an attorney, and when I went to law school, and for decades after I finished law school, the Second Amendment was considered the right to have a gun to protect your home. It was considered a pistol or a shotgun, and it wasn't considered an automatic weapon, a machine gun, or anything like that. Those weren't even in the picture. It's become the last 20 or so years, or 25 years, I guess, the Supreme Court has interpreted it differently, and people have interpreted it differently. But the Second Amendment talked about a well-regulated militia being essential and important for society. We can regulate a militia. We can regulate the use of handguns. There's no absolute rights. You have a right of free speech, but you don't have a right to scream fire in a theater. So you have a right to a shotgun. You have a right to a pistol. You have a right to a long rifle. You don't have a right to a machine gun. You don't have a right to a bazooka. You don't have a right to a howitzer. There are certain types of arms that you can have, and certain types that the Congress would say you shouldn't have, and we have the ability to regulate that because the rights are there, but they are a well-regulated militia. You can't regulate, and we should be regulating the protection of the public at large.
Congressman, the senator from Texas, John Cornyn, is taking part in bipartisan talks over formulating some kind of action to prevent these atrocities. What items are vital to put in any bill that might come out of Congress, and how confident are you that something might actually pass?
Well, obviously, I'd like to see a restriction on assault weapons, if not a total ban. I'd like to see improvements on our background checks, and I'd certainly like to see a red flag law, to where if somebody exhibits to law enforcement to a probable cause that they're going to commit an act of violence against themselves or others, that they can have their weapons taken from them for a period of time. That would be important and necessary. We saw this young man had a history of social media posts that showed he was going to do something that was violent towards a school or toward women. It was about rape, and it was about shooting, and he should have had his weapons taken from him. And the same thing we had in Parkland. There were indications on social media, and if somebody could have acted, the red flag law could have gone into effect and saved some of the students. So I think we need those things. I have respect for John Cornyn and him working with Chris Murphy and the working group in the Senate. I wish they could come up with a perfect bill. There's not such a thing. If they come up with anything, it'll be an improvement. It won't be as good as the House. The House is going to be working soon on a bill, and I think the House bill will be it'll be what we need and what encompass all of the different issues that we have. Ghost guns are a problem too, and many of the killings are done by ghost guns, and I don't think they should be permitted. That gets around law enforcement. We can do this in law-abiding citizens. Law-abiding citizens want a gun in their home. I have a gun in my home, a pistol. But you ought to have a pistol, a rifle, a shotgun, not an assault weapon. And it ought to be one that is regulated.
And Congressman, quickly, if Congress fails to pass meaningful gun reform, do you think the White House should take executive action? Should they issue executive action on something related to guns?
Just like they did with George Floyd, if the Congress will not do the right thing, the president has to do it. You know, Donald Trump did the ban on bump stocks after the Las Vegas killing, and he had a bump stock, and we tried to pass it by legislation. I think the House passed it, I'm not sure, but it didn't become law, and that would have been the Senate problem, and that's always been the problem. The Senate is the problem. The filibuster is the problem, and the filibuster is not in the Constitution, and the filibuster ought to go.
Congressman Steve Cohen, we have to leave the conversation there. We appreciate your time as always. Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course. So dozens of families are sharing memories of their loved ones, those lost in Tuesday's massacre. 11-year-old Miranda Mathis was a bright girl who her family says was fun and spunky. Her brother was her best friend, and he was also at Robb Elementary School when the shooting happened, but he survived. Miranda's cousin posted on Facebook saying in part, quote, "My sweet baby cousin, we loved you dearly. I'm so sorry this happened to you." Also, Alexandria Alexi Rubio was an honor roll student who'd received a Good Citizen Award just hours before the shooting. Her parents were actually at the school helping her receive that award. They say they are so proud of her. They had no idea that celebrating that achievement with her on Tuesday would be their final goodbye. They say she was kind and sweet and that she appreciated life. Lexi was going to be an all-star in softball. They say that she had a bright future. Whether it was in sports or in academics, she had hoped to one day become a lawyer. Stay with New Day. We're back after a quick break.
It's a mystery that gripped the world.
If you have Madeline, let her come home to her mummy, daddy, brother and sister.
A young girl's disappearance from a seaside resort.
Please give our little girl back.
15 years later, a major break.
Portuguese authorities have said that they have named a suspect.
CNN investigates.
So to be clear, the formal suspect is a convicted rapist and a known pedophile.
Missing Madeline McCann. Saturday.
It's 9 o'clock in the morning at the University of Dayton.
How is everyone? What we're going to do this morning.
Tony Talbot is teaching a class about slavery.
There's over 40 million human trafficking victims in the world today.
But his students aren't just learning the facts about human trafficking. They're being trained to teach others about it, students who are even younger than they are.
We get the students to become near-peer educators, going into classrooms, giving human trafficking awareness presentations. If we tell children about this now, they can become part of the solution.
Hi guys, my name is Ami. I'm a second-year student at the University of Dayton.
Today, Talbot students are taking over Nick Pent's 9th grade American history class at the Dayton Regional STEM School.
It's definitely important to know what is trafficking, because maybe you're in that situation and you don't even know that you're being trafficked.
A lot more online trafficking is happening, and I didn't really realize that before, but now that we do, you can obviously use more precautions when you're online.
I'm hoping that my students, now that they're knowledgeable, hopefully they get a little bit passionate about it, become leaders. I'm telling you, you just got to step aside and let the next generation do its thing.
Thank you.
is an emotional interview. A doctor opening up about the impact that not one but two mass shootings have had on her staff, on herself, and her family. CNN's Lucy Kavanaugh got exclusive access to San Antonio University Hospital. That's where several victims of the Uvalde mass shooting were taken.
Get the glide scope in there, please.
At San Antonio's University Health Hospital.
All of us would be in a level 1 alpha if one came in. Anesthesia's on their way, blood bank is on their way.
Doctors and nurses prepare to receive the most critically wounded. It's one of the busiest trauma centers in the nation.
You have yours laid?
Yep, I got
a 21 and a 15 up. Okay. Perfect.
And CNN got exclusive access inside as Pediatric Trauma Medical Center Director Dr. Lillian Liao and her team demonstrated preparations for a mass casualty event.
Anesthesia's here. Go ahead and get up there with Kelly so we can back her up in case it becomes a difficult airway.
Today, it's a drill.
This is one of the teams that we formed. And the day of the mass casualty event, we formed multiple teams such as this.
But it wasn't a drill on Tuesday, when a teenage gunman burst inside Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, murdering 19 children and 2 teachers, injuring at least 17 others, officials say.
It's devastating. You know, I think the same thing that every other person in this country is thinking, you know, how horrible their last moments were, right? And what that scene looks like.
The trauma unit prepared to receive dozens of Uvalde's wounded.
The blood. The blood's been checked.
Nurse Colleen Davis recalled the agonizing wait for patients and a grim realization.
After a while, you start realizing more aren't coming, and you start realizing why, and then the weight of that just kind of sets in, and it stays with you for the rest of the day and all the days after.
4 of the victims were brought right here to University Hospital, 3 little girls and the shooter's grandmother. For the doctors and nurses working here, it unfortunately wasn't their first mass shooting.
Less than 5 years ago, a gunman slaughtered 26 people at the First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs, just 34 miles southeast of downtown San Antonio. Dr. Liao was on duty.
None of us anticipated that we would be involved in yet another mass casualty event. It's not something we imagined.
Trauma nurse Crystal Flores was working alongside Dr. Liao in 2017 as patients wounded in the church massacre began to flood in. She can't believe it's happened again.
I immediately got like this horrible feeling in the pit of my stomach and deja vu, basically because it was even in the same location where we got notified from Sutherland Springs.
Flores is haunted by the lives her team couldn't save.
Just keep replaying things in my brain and thinking like, what if they would have gotten here like 30 minutes after the first notification? We probably would have saved a lot of people, but it's just what ifs, and it just doesn't change the outcome.
Like many of her trauma center colleagues, Flores is also a parent.
He just turned 6 and he's in kindergarten. And today's his last day of school, and I have a 1-year-old. It's just hard, and it's just, how do you tell them?
Dr. Liao says she copes by focusing on the good, her team, her family, and her little ones.
That's what you want to amplify at a time like this, is amplify the being grateful and the kindness that the world shows rather than focusing on the negative, because that can really put you in a wrong place moving forward.
She breaks down when talking about the invisible scars the surviving children will carry.
You know, I kind of thought back to when I was 10 years old, and so when I was 10 years old, my family immigrated to this country. And my biggest challenge was learning to speak English. And you just can't imagine what these children are going through. And it's really unfair. It's really unfair.
Lucy Kavanaugh, CNN, San Antonio, Texas.
No, her feelings are overwhelming, as a lot are, and we're taking you to Uvalde next. This is a small town, and it's very different today than it was just 5 days ago. Stay with us.
Sunny day in Cape Town and today.
We invite you with open arms to our wonderful country.
All new Inside Africa. Go inside the inventive minds, evolving places, and creative trends of the Africa you need to know now. A film academy designed to help young African creatives thrive.
There's a kind of free flow and a spirit out there that I think is very, very exciting.
Inside Africa on CNN, in association with Zenith Bank.
Real news that shapes our world.
Connect the world with Becky Anderson, Monday through Friday on CNN.
Mainland China tolerates no signs of dissent whatsoever.
Are you anticipating dozens of people being prosecuted? Hundreds? Thousands?
Stories of mass internment camps have been trickling out.
Do you think you'll see your husband again?
This period of mourning is taking place in a real climate of fear. The humanitarian crisis that is unfolding in front of our eyes here.
This is one of the cells? Come on in here.
We're flying over ISIS front lines. This is the only protection we have. Nerves are still very much on edge. Firefighters have been battling this blaze for weeks.
What do you say to people who question climate change?
We need to do something now.
Ivan Watson, CNN.
I'm Nick Robertson in Helsinki, and this is CNN.
The community of Uvalde, Texas is grieving, mourning the loss of 2 teachers and 19 children, 21 lives taken too soon. A hard reality to face in a town that neighbors describe as an extended family. Now the community is trying to cope with the fact that their town and their lives will be forever changed. CNN's Rosa Flores has more.
In the small town of Uvalde, Texas, hearts are heavy.
I lost family and friends to this, and I can't bear it.
And the pain is palpable.
My heart aches. I couldn't imagine my life without my daughter.
As the community grapples with the unthinkable, 19 elementary school children and 2 teachers murdered in the classroom. The quaint town square turned into a memorial.
I just can't. I have no more tears after crying all day yesterday. I can't.
With crosses bearing the names of every victim.
How are you doing?
Heartbroken.
Especially the parents.
Yeah, the parents. It's like, oh my gosh.
Emotions are high at the nearby Mexican restaurant, a local staple for a town that is overwhelmingly Hispanic. Dili Martinez was born and raised here. She attended Robb Elementary.
We are like a big family here. We really are. And it's unfortunate what happened here. It really is.
In Uvalde, it seems like everyone knows someone who was impacted by this tragedy. Victor Rivera moved here recently and says even he knows multiple people who lost children.
Pray that the families are okay and pray that the kids rest in peace.
The pain spurring the gun debate, with some residents pushing for upping the minimum age to purchase guns.
Let anybody use a gun that's 20 years, 21 years and older. We need guns. We need to protect ourselves.
And for the arming of teachers.
Teachers should be able to carry, definitely. That's one of them. Like, how are you supposed to protect the kids behind a closed door when a gun can definitely go through it?
One by one, members of the community have been delivering flowers to another growing memorial. This one is also a crime scene.
I went to school here, and my niece lives down the street. My family lives not even it's right behind the school. This is my home.
For many members of this community, the pain is overwhelming. Like for this grandmother who was overcome with emotion. Her words are etched on the cross of one of the victims. She wrote, "I will always love you, my beautiful granddaughter."
Only God can bring healing, definitely. God will heal Uvalde.
Our thanks to Rosa Flores for that report. One heart-wrenching aspect of these kinds of shootings is the trauma that they leave behind, especially for the young children who survived. They're going to be marked by the carnage that they witnessed and the friends that they lost. Our next guest knows exactly what these children are going through. Will Beck was a sophomore in Littleton, Colorado in 1999 when two students opened fire on classmates and teachers at Columbine High School. Will, thank you so much for being with us this morning. I'm wondering what came to mind when you got the news that there'd been yet another school shooting.
Yeah, I mean, my heart absolutely just broke for those kids, and it broke for the parents. I think of my own kids now that I have them, and like how terrified I would be to have them not be safe and to worry about them. And you know, I just know what it feels like to join that club where your life is changed forever because of a school shooting, and I don't want that for anyone, you know.
And Will, I'm not sure if you could see it, but we just shared with our viewers a picture of your beautiful family. I'm wondering, how do you explain these incidents to your kids, having been through it yourself?
You know, I tell them that there's a lot of hate in the world, and there's a lot of people who don't feel loved, who are kind of really lost. And sometimes they do crazy, horrible things. And that's kind of always been the case in the world. And we just need to spread goodness. We need to be kind, and we need to love others and try to like reach out to those kids that are lost and struggling so that they don't feel the pain and have to do something crazy like this, you know? And I just tell them too, like, no matter what's happening out there, like we need to still have courage to live our best life and to not totally live in fear, you know. And that's the hardest thing, is like after these shootings, you're afraid everywhere you go. And to just kind of be able to put that aside and say, hey, I'm going to keep living, it's really important.
I imagine that is not an easy journey. You know, you were in high school when the attack in Columbine happened. These children here in Uvalde are very young. They're much younger than you were. Share with us, if you could, how the shooting shaped your life and how you think it could potentially shape the lives of these little boys and girls. Do you think it's possible for them to overcome those anxieties and those fears that you shared about going into any building, because seemingly anywhere is a target, an elementary school, a church, a theater.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I know for a long, long time, I never went into a place without looking at the door all the time. And I look at people differently in terms of, you know, is that person going to be the person that is attacking me, you know? And that has changed a lot over the last few years, but we're talking, it's been 23 years since Columbine happened, you know? And so it is a process of healing. And for me, I felt like it was about 5 years before I felt like I was who I was again, you know? So it definitely still hurts today, though. And it's something I don't think these kids will ever get over. There's just no getting over that. But I think they will have great lives. And I think these kids will show that they're strong and they're resilient. And this town, Uvalde, will show like, hey, they can overcome. I look at Littleton, Colorado, and I see a strength and a bond today, 23 years later, that wouldn't be there without Columbine. And so I think, you know, these people will get over it, and they'll build back together stronger.
Hey, Will, it means so much for you to share your story and your pain with us. Will Beck, thanks for being with us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Make sure to stay with CNN throughout the day for live coverage of President Biden's visit to Uvalde, Texas, as he joins this community and the country in mourning those lost in a mass shooting that killed 21 people at Robb Elementary School, including 19 children.
If we meet every commitment, if every country meets every commitment of the Paris Climate Accords, almost 50% of the world's energy is still going to come from natural gas and oil in 2040. And that means we need more investment in this sector, not just in the United States, but throughout the world. While at the same time, we need to be reducing emissions. And that's a top priority for us as well. In fact, the American Petroleum Institute came out with a policy just last year on how you can continue to invest in American oil and gas while at the same time reduce emissions. And we have a good record. In fact, in the power sector, just in the last 15 years, we've been able to reduce emissions by 40%. And most of that is because of a fuel switch that has gone on from coal to natural gas. We want to be able to continue to export that environmental progress throughout the world.
I am Nigerian by blood, British by birth, and American by residence. It is important to me that those same strands of inclusivity that flow through me are mirrored in the stories that we tell. One World is a place where Africa has an equal seat at the global table alongside Europe, the Americas, and Asia. Every continent has a voice, and where everyone watching has a stake in the global conversation.
One World with Zain Asher, weeknights on CNN.
Afghan women are afraid that this is the beginning of your efforts to erase them from the workspace.
It's not clear. Even if we appear with the burqa, maybe they will say that women's voices are forbidden.
Did you ever imagine that you would be prevented from going to school?
Girls' education is fundamental to the dignity of Afghan life.
Do you believe that young girls will be allowed to go to school here in Afghanistan?
Today, a special State of the Union, live from Uvalde, Texas, in the wake of the elementary school massacre. Outrage over law enforcement's response. And will Congress do anything this time? State of the Union, today on CNN.
We all have our own emotions around what we've seen this week in Uvalde, but parents in particular are really grappling with how to keep their children safe and talk to them about this shooting. I want to bring in somebody who can help us kind of navigate those conversations. With us right now, we have from Boston, clinical psychologist and director of the Child, Adolescent, Fear and Anxiety Treatment Program at Boston University. I wanted to get all of that right, Dr. Rachel Mearson. Doctor, thank you so much for being with us. You know, these days, kids at very young ages are going through drills at school. I don't know that this is wholly foreign to them. It is the actual act of it, but on some level, maybe we think that they're prepared when we know that they're really not, are they?
I mean, it's almost impossible to truly be prepared to face such a tragic and traumatic event. You know, just like we do fire drills, we can do shooter drills at school, and that can give our kids some sense of what to do, but that doesn't and shouldn't prepare them for actually being in a situation like these poor children.
Exactly. So what behavioral signals would we recognize that would tell us we need to start having conversations with those kids?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think right now, even taking a step back before we think about behavioral signals, is that for most kids, it's probably important for a parent or caregiver to have a conversation with them and just to check in about their experiences related to what's going on. Very young kids, those conversations probably are unnecessary unless you know for sure that your child has had some exposure to hearing about this event. But any kid who has any type of independent access to media has heard about Uvalde. It's almost impossible not to have if you're online in any way. So parents should be checking in with their kids, asking them in an open-ended way, tell me a little bit about what you've heard on the news. What do you think about what you're reading? What questions do you have? Lots of times kids hear a little bit of information and then kind of fill in the gaps and have misperceptions. So it's important for parents to, in a very matter-of-fact but not overly detailed way, help correct those misperceptions with some factual information. And then really to just check in with their kids emotionally and validate fear, sadness, anger, anxiety, while also acknowledging that some kids, may feel some fleeting sadness, but be much more focused on their soccer game or their math test, and that's all right as well. You asked about behavioral signals, though. So there are, some kids who are prone to anxiety and are more vulnerable to strong emotional reactions, particularly kids who may have had some past exposure to gun violence or community violence, for whom this might not only feel scary because of what it is, but because it's also triggering memories of their own kind of personal traumatic events. So some signals that you might want to look out for to suggest, we really need to make sure we're giving this child some extra support are things like significant changes in eating or sleeping patterns, behaviors like excessive clinginess to caregivers, or really significant reluctance to leave the house, to go to school, to go into community settings, a loss of interest in activities and withdrawal from friends and from kind of family connections. And also for young children, for all of us, but especially for young kids, anxiety can sometimes really present physiologically. So kids may be complaining of things like stomach aches and headaches that are a signal of underlying emotional distress.
Dr. Merson, this is great information for all of us who are trying to have these conversations with our kids. Thank you very much for your expertise and sharing it with us.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
Of course. We'll be right back.
Okay.
We'll be landing shortly in South Africa.
Sunny day in Cape Town and today we've got some
We invite you with open arms to our wonderful country.
コーヒーの持つ力って人と人をつなぐ力だと思ってて、うちの会社のビジョンっていうのは日本のコーヒーといえばフィロコフィアってなることなんですよ。からそれを達成するには世界に向けた通販が必要だったんですよね。
Bring the energy.
Welcome to the draft.
Aramco Team Series London goes to Team Callum.
3 pros, 1 amateur. Let's go.
When we wanted to move faster and see more of the world, we found a way. We also found ways to connect beyond boundaries. And when an unprecedented pandemic tried to derail us, we found ways to get ahead.
Are we ready?
Ready.
Ready.
Ready. Ready.
As your bank, we have stayed proactive, creating dynamic solutions and leveraging cutting-edge technology to drive global expansion into new markets. We rolled up our sleeves to be human together, doing more, innovating smarter, and always showing up for you. So come on board, let's give you more.
Access, more than banking. In our world, every day is a beautiful one. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Hundreds of flights have already been canceled this morning amid a chaotic holiday travel weekend. According to flight tracking website FlightAware, more than 700 flights have been canceled today after 1,500 cancellations yesterday. Delta Airlines is most affected by the flight disruptions after having to cut about 9% of its operations yesterday. There was hail, high winds, and that could turn out to be a pretty stormy Sunday for a lot of us across the country. More than 10 million people are at risk for some sort of severe storm today. CNN's Karen McGuinness has the latest forecast for us. So how expansive is this wicked weather?
Well, as you mentioned, the 10 million people across the upper Mississippi River Valley into the Great Lakes region, the northern tier, even into the Central Plains. That's just for today, but it goes into Monday as well. And already this morning, we've had reports of large-sized hail. That was tennis ball size hail in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and a 74-mile-an-hour wind gust at Lake City, South Dakota. So those storms are already firing up. All of this is part of a very vigorous late spring storm system that is actually across the interior west. That's injecting some of this energy into the Central Plains. It's been very warm here, and as a consequence, we're seeing the firing up of these big storms. Now, some of the tornadoes, according to the Storm Prediction Center, they're saying they could be intense long-track tornadoes, mostly during the evening hours. That's when we'll see probably some of the strongest storms. But already today, there is a severe thunderstorm watch that is in effect across a portion of Minnesota and South Dakota. Here's where it is as we go into the rest of today, and then going into Monday, and then for Tuesday, still severe weather risk extending from Minnesota all the way down towards Nebraska. As I mentioned, we've got a vigorous storm system across the interior west. Snowfall, if your friends went to Yellowstone, have them send you some pictures. Snow is in the forecast there. There's the risk for Monday and Tuesday. Monday, about 15 million people, Christy, could see the result of that severe weather with tornadoes, hail, and high winds.
Wow. All right. Karen McGuinness, we appreciate the heads up. Thank you so much. And we appreciate you. Thank you for sharing part of your morning with us. Inside Politics Sunday with Abby Phillip is up next, of course. Quick reminder to you, though, catch the new CNN film Julia. It premieres tomorrow night. Here's a preview.
Julia never called herself a feminist, although she was